Welcome in. Welcome back to In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden with you here on a Wednesday, officially 7 days away, a week out from the fabled Christmas holiday. Oh, what fun it is to ride and sing a sledding song tonight. I don't know. Didn't expect to go down that route in the intro, but we did. We did it anyway. Because as you know by now, for those of you who listen or watch regularly, the intros can be a little bit all over the place. And I think I like that. And, and I'll continue to do so moving forward as long as I'm having fun doing it. And I hope you're having yourself a good week so far. Midway through the week. And similar to Thanksgiving, I'm sure many of you have saved up maybe some of your final vacation days. Maybe you're taking some extended time off here over the next couple of weeks. Maybe some of your places of work take off the entire couple of weeks between Christmas and New Year's, getting to enjoy some extended automatic time off. For example, if you're a teacher like my wife, or maybe you work in a factory. And the reason I even mentioned that is because I used to work for a very brief time. It was for less than 6 months at a factory down in near Bowling Green, Kentucky, where I went to college. It was a place called Yahagi. And it was, I don't remember exactly what the entire plant did. I know it had something to do with car parts, and I know I did some variation of quality control. But I remember that plant would shut down for the entire 2 weeks where there was Christmas and then New Year's the following week. So if you're somebody who has that luxury, privilege, whatever you want to call it, then props to you. I guess I'm just jealous, you know. I wish I had some extra vacation time to take. And with this show, this is more like I take off when I want to take off, sort of. I have to, run it by the brass, my boys Alec Lasley and Kyler Staley in some way, shape, or form. But it's not the same thing as, my iHeart position where I'm given an allotted amount of vacation time. And when it runs out, then it's just gone. But I will be, I mentioned this before, and I'll continue to mention it until we get there. We'll not have a show on Wednesday, a week from now on Christmas Day for obvious reasons. Not sure about New Year's Day yet. It'll depend on how how things have gone over, I guess, between now and then. And, what's going on with Indiana football. If there's things to talk about on New Year's Day, maybe we'll do a show on New Year's Day. Who knows? But anyhow, welcome in. It's not that day yet. It is December 18th, 2024. And as I mentioned previously, hope you're enjoying yourself. And hopefully you'll continue to enjoy yourself over the course of however long the show ends up being today here on a Wednesday morning and afternoon. I'm going to have Derrick Jackson back on the show today, former Indiana football player for Bill Mallory, defensive back. Had him on a couple of weeks ago before the Purdue game, and we'll be chatting with him weekly until Indiana bows out of the college football playoffs. So hopefully getting to chat with him a few more times between now and the end of the CFB postseason. Also still got a few more guests later on this week. On Friday, the plan is to have Mitchell Page and Jeffrey the Greek. And I'm still working on that special guest that I've teased a couple of different times. And it's not like I'm teasing somebody that's, a national name of any sorts. And it's really just a unique kind of guest I want to have on. I don't believe this person I've reached out to and trying to confirm things with. I don't believe he does many interviews from what I can tell. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that and I'm just ignorant. But I'm looking forward to the potential chance for that special guest to come on the In Touch with Indiana Sports here within the next week or so, maybe sooner. We'll see. But once I can confirm or deny if this person is able to come on, I'll let you know who it is or was. And until then, sit back and relax, right? Sit tight. Don't get too excited. I'll get excited because I'd love to talk to this person. And maybe you would too love to hear from them. And I hope that's the case. That's why I do what I do on this show. I like to talk with people who are interesting and can give us different perspectives on stuff. That's why you listen to podcasts in general. You get to hear different people's unique perspectives on things, like Indiana football, like Indiana basketball. And my God, there are a lot of perspectives right now on Indiana basketball, and we are going to get to some of that in a bit. Man, love the YouTube comments. I love a lot of good comments this past Monday show. Going to go through several of them today. Many of them have to do with Indiana basketball. A couple have to do with football as well. And yeah, I'll just save it at that. Well, I think we're going to split up YouTube comments into a couple of different segments of the show today. I'm not going to do it here in just a moment. But we'll do YouTube comments before we segue into Derrick Jackson, and then right after we finish with Derrick Jackson as well, just because there's a decent amount that I want to read and get into. Because, like I said, a lot of people very vocal about certain things. And I'll go ahead and warn you now. And some of you will probably find this fun, like I do. But some of you, I can't tell if some people, when they type in the comments, if whenever they put a bunch of different, punctuation marks, I can't tell if they're doing it to be fun or funny, or if they're genuinely mad or angry, or if it's a combination of the two. But if you decide to do that, I'm going to read it on the show in a very dramatic fashion for effect. So just a heads up to those who may comment like that in the future. Just a little teaser for later. Maybe it ends up not being good at all, but I found some of these comments, one in particular, to be pretty, at least the way that it was, I'll just leave it at that. I'm beginning to over explain when I don't need to do that. And I'll let the comment speak for itself when we get to that point. All right, let's go ahead and get into a few things. For Friday, college football playoff, there will be a mega cast for the first round games that are televised on the ESPN family of networks. And of course, that includes Indiana's game against Notre Dame. There will be several different ways that you can take in the game. And I just found it very interesting. The first one, obviously, is the main telecast, which you can watch on either ABC or ESPN. ESPN2 will be the command center. I don't know if that necessarily means it's going to be like a round table of people like talking. I'm assuming that's what it would be. Kind of just reacting to the game as it happens. I don't really know if that would be entertaining or not. ESPN News will be hosting the Skycast. Don't know what that is either, but maybe it's just an aerial view from like the Goodyear blimp, something along those lines. Again, don't know what the benefit of using that or watching from that perspective would be. And then a few more on ESPN Deportes. You can watch it in Spanish. ESPN Radio is the national radio broadcast. And then on ESPN, I guess, Plus, as it says streaming, you can watch the marching band performances. And one thing I wish they had included on this, and when I first saw the graphic that they were doing a mega cast, what I'm about to say is why I was initially excited. And then I looked further into it, and it doesn't include what I thought was going to be included. And that is a separate broadcast for that. It's the televised game, right? Like the same thing you would get on ABC or ESPN, but instead of the main telecast broadcasters, you get Indiana's personal play-by-play people, so Don Fisher and all that stuff. And then you could do the same thing with Notre Dame. I thought that was going to be an option. And so because I remember, if I'm not mistaken, during the Final Four, and maybe they still do this every season, I don't know if they do, but I remember one particular Final Four several years ago. They had very similar megacast type thing going on where you could listen to the main one. You could listen to each of the home teams. I don't think they had Skycast or whatever that thing might be. But it would just be I think you'd get a lot of people for both sides, at least that are watching the game for their particular team. And you hear people all the time saying, "Oh, I just shut the audio off and I listen to Don Fisher while I watch the game." Well, that would solve this problem altogether. So I don't know if there's any sort of licensing thing nowadays that keeps that from happening, but I wish that was an option instead of some of these other ones. Now, there's a couple of different options for Tennessee versus Ohio State, or at least one different option that I could see, and one additional one. On ESPN, I was going to say ESPNU. ESPNU will be the command center as opposed to ESPN2. But on ESPN2 for the Tennessee-Ohio State game, you're going to get Field Pass with the Pat McAfee show. I'm curious as to why Indiana versus Notre Dame is not getting that option. Because one other additional thing that Tennessee-Ohio State will have is SEC network coverage in some way, shape, or form. And of course, because the Big Ten network is not an ESPN affiliate, you're not going to get any sort of Big Ten network coverage, I wouldn't think, from those games. I don't know. Is BTN doing a BTN tailgate of some sort just on their own accord and it's not being announced as a part of this? Maybe I'm completely wrong about that. But that'll be interesting. That is for sure, all of this. I'll probably just be watching the main telecast, as I'm sure many of you will be. There may be times where I just switch over to see what those other things are like, particularly the Skycast. I can't tell if that's something that would be of interest or not. And as I'm talking about this, I'm trying to, here we go. This kind of explains what the Skycast is. Or a few different. So Friday, I'll just read this little excerpt. It says, Friday night's game between the Hoosiers and Fighting Irish will see the main telecast airing on both ABC and ESPN. The network's command center will air on ESPN with multiple camera angles showcasing different parts of the action. That's nothing new there. And then there's the consistent Sky Cam on ESPN News. So it still doesn't really give us any indicator of what that is. I guess it's just a constant camera, like a live stream of, as if you were watching it from, like I said, the Goodyear blimp. I don't know. Very weird stuff. But hey, what else are they going to put on ESPN News while the college football playoff games are going on? I don't know what they'd put on that people would care about. All right, what else? Moving on from that. On the basketball side of things, I believe this became a piece of news as soon as I finished recording on Monday. And that's that Indiana basketball is going to redshirt Gabe Cupps, who is likely going to be out for the rest of the season with a knee injury. And of course, as unfortunate for him, wish him the best of luck in his recovery. And I don't remember. I know he hasn't played a lot so far this season. And in the limited minutes that we had seen Gabe Cupps in, I don't want to say he had taken a step back, but it definitely seemed like he got a little bit buried on the depth chart so far this season. And so it's anybody's best guess what Gabe Cupps will decide to do following this season and going into the offseason. He will, of course, save some eligibility by redshirting. And it would not surprise me if he decides to stay or if he decides to go. Your guess, like I said, is as good as mine. I wouldn't be surprised after already being on a roster for 2 seasons if he doesn't at least explore his options in the transfer portal. Now, I wouldn't expect somebody with the production that Gabe Cupps has given Indiana in a year and a few games. I wouldn't expect a lot of big name programs to be chomping at the bit for Gabe Cupps. And that's not to say he wouldn't be able to thrive in another marquee program. I would just assume, based on what he has done so far, if he does decide to move on and explore options elsewhere, it would likely be at a lower level. But who knows? That's so far away into the end of this season that's a discussion we'll end up having really after a number of things take place. Of course, what happens with this Indiana team in general will likely determine how most people decide to spend their offseason. If Mike Woodson and company have a really good year and they get back to the NCAA tournament comfortably and, get back to the second weekend potentially, I mean, that's reason for optimism moving forward, and that may give players an incentive to stay. Now, if things fall off the tracks and Indiana misses the tournament once again, let's just theoretically say, and this wouldn't be that big of a shock, of course, that Indiana fires Mike Woodson at the end of the season after missing the tournament for the second straight year, then you probably will see a ton of roster turnover. And at that point, Gabe Cupps, as well as a few other players, would likely put their name in just to see what's going to happen. You saw that with Indiana football when Tom Allen was let go. The entire offensive line went in the transfer portal. But guess what? Kurt Signetti retained Bob Bostad. And I don't know if every offensive lineman returned. I don't remember. I know there are a lot of familiar faces on this particular O-line. But that is, when people jump in the portal, people love to panic. And I realize I'm diving into something I wasn't necessarily planning on getting to right now, but it is a good thing to think about. Every time a coach is let go or things are not going well, and again, in particular, when a coach is let go, everyone panics like, oh my gosh, where's the roster going? Where everybody's gone? What are we going to do? Are we going to be able to field a team next year? Are we going to be able to put a team on the court? Look what Louisville and Kentucky did. Louisville and Kentucky this past offseason, and talking about basketball in this specific instance, both moved on from their head coaches. At least one of them moved on from the program, that being John Calipari. And they built an entire team from scratch. And Indiana basketball, if they are eventually in that position where they have to do that, they will be fine. I don't know how good they will be in year one. All that, again, now I'm really jumping. I'm just assuming Mike Woodson's going to be gone, and maybe that's going to end up happening, and I'm just trying not to get too far ahead of myself, but Indiana will be fine if it comes to that. So, and these branching pathways of these conversations, they could be fun, but sometimes I have to stop myself and be like, hold up a second, John. You are getting way too ahead of yourself, and yeah, these conversations can be fun, but there is still a lot of season left. And I know there's not a lot to be excited about at the moment, and that will bring me to some YouTube comments that I was referring to earlier here in just a second. But there's, without trying to repeat a whole lot of what I said the other day about the state of Indiana basketball, I mean, there is still, what are we? So Indiana's 10 games into the season, if I'm not mistaken, currently 8-3 or not 11. I don't have the record. There are 10 or 11 games into the season, of course. Very close to jumping into conference play for the remainder of the season. I'd say they're about a third of the way through of the year right now, because I know they play 31 games in the regular season. And if they're at 10 or 11, they're, of course, right around that 33% mark. And if we're grading Indiana basketball on that first third of the season, I'd give them a C-, maybe a D+ when you consider expectations. Because when I'm thinking C-, I'm just thinking, okay, general, if you just put this record and resume on a blank canvas, like you throw away the Indiana name, and you throw, like, it doesn't matter what program you're a part of. You said this team had this record with these results against these teams, probably C- would be the general consensus. But when you factor in the fact that this is Indiana, with all of the expectations that they had coming into this year with the roster that they have, I'd say you could say D+ if we're grading how things looked. And again, that doesn't mean that this team is terrible. It doesn't mean that they can't turn things around. And that grade would be very highly based on a few results, of course, because Indiana will always get compared with the best of the best when it comes to competition. And all 3 times they faced competition that was of a higher level than some of the other teams they faced, they laid a big fat egg. Now, Nebraska was not the exact same type of game that you got with Louisville and Gonzaga, of course, but the way that game got away from them, that's something that Indiana fans do not like to see, and rightfully so. Indiana should never get beaten by, I mean, I hate to feel like I'm disrespecting Nebraska, because Fred Hoiberg has done fantastic things there, excuse me. But they're not, I mean, Nebraska got beat by 30 to Michigan State. And if you're Indiana, you look at Michigan State, you want to be on that caliber level. you don't want to walk into Pinnacle Bank Arena and expect to lose by double digits. And I didn't expect that the other night. And they play again. I'm getting into that point where I think I'm starting to repeat myself. So I'll wrap this up and get into some comments here in a second. You know what? We'll go and do it now because now I've lost my train of thought overthinking everything. So let's take a sip of coffee real quick, reset, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with some of these comments. I know we're 20 minutes in, and I normally don't like to go super long before I bring in Derrick Jackson, but I already mentioned that I want to do, while we're talking all this basketball stuff, I want to go ahead and do these basketball comments, and then we'll fully transition over into football with Derrick Jackson and probably continue on a football route throughout the majority of the rest of the way. And then looking ahead to Friday, probably the entire show is going to be football related. And I know Indiana does play a basketball game the day after on Saturday. But like I said, who cares? It's Chattanooga. Beat them bad. Don't get don't give anyone a reason to clown you the day after Indiana's college football playoff game against Notre Dame. That's all that needs to be said about Indiana's game at Chattanooga. So let's reset here. I want to get into some YouTube comments. And I'm going to start with this one really quick. And this is not the funny one I'm referring to. You'll know when I get to it. And again, maybe I'm overselling it. But speaking of selling, I was talking about what would the arena look like this Saturday against Chattanooga, given the circumstances and how there's kind of been empty seats all year long. We get a commenter. He didn't give a name. His name on here is just SportsFan938. And he gives a really good explanation on some stuff that I wasn't fully aware of, but I thought I'd go ahead and share this on the show just because it is some good information. And he says this: IU selling out a basketball game this season depends on if you consider the official attendance or the actual number in the arena. By the definition of a sellout, every ticket on the primary market has been sold almost every game, making them officially sellouts. However, when you consider the actual number in the arena, it has been anywhere from half to three-quarters full, with South Carolina the closest to matching the number of tickets sold and being somewhat full. All basketball games are officially sold out by preseason by season tickets, except when students are on break. So that means for the next 4 games, every other game will list a sellout of 17,222 all season, since, of course, the university sold all of the tickets. However, the actual numbers will be much less and not the actual sellouts of the football stadium where it was actually full during the back half of the season. Thank you for that explanation, SportsFan938. And maybe I sound ignorant not knowing that. It makes total sense. And I wish I had thought about that, prior, but now that makes complete sense because it's always difficult to buy Indiana tickets through, unless you're a season ticket holder, unless you're buying them on a third-party website. But much different this year, considering the circumstances and the lower amount of demand, and things will look even more interesting over the course of the next couple of non-conference games. I'm sure you'll see that move upward with Rutgers, and I don't know if there's one more home game without students or not. He mentioned 4 games, so maybe there is one more that I'm not recalling. Might be that USC game, if I'm not mistaken. But I do think you'll see a lot of people buy up those tickets for the conference games specifically. I do still fully believe that this Saturday's game against Chattanooga will probably be the lowest attended game this season. And it's true for multiple reasons. And those are, you're not playing nearly as well. The football team plays the night before in South Bend at night. Again, just to reiterate that. And then students are on break. All 3 of those factors why this Saturday's game will likely be very low attended. So without dwelling on that too much, just wanted to shout out the commenter for all of that. All right, let's go ahead and continue some more of these real quick. Kevin Casey says, I enjoy your optimism, John. Indiana's played 3 good teams this year, and they've gotten blown out by all 3 of them. I thought it was time for a change last year, but definitely this year has to be over. And I agree with you, Kevin, if things continue to go down the trajectory that we were, that you're referring to. If things don't look like they're going to take a step forward, then there's absolutely no more reason to hold on to Mike Woodson at the end of this year. And at this point, that's why I mentioned how we're at a crossroads. There's been a decent amount of good, but enough bad to get people already thinking, okay, this isn't going to work. And so that's why I mentioned that these first few games in conference play beginning in January are so important for not only this season, but for whether or not Mike Woodson is going to end up keeping his job. So we'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening. But that Rutgers game, man, I know Rutgers has kind of had Indiana's number, kind of similar to how Nebraska has. If you can't beat Nebraska or Rutgers at home, I don't care if Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are on that roster. There's no reason Indiana shouldn't find a way to win your home games against, especially because Rutgers is not an elite team. They're an average to good team right now. They may end up being better than their record shows based on the talent level that they do have. But if Indiana can't figure out how to get it done against Rutgers, I mean, things will turn bad in a hurry if they not already are. So let's continue on the negative train. And again, I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, this is just where we're at right now with Indiana basketball. Ancient All-Star back once again. He said, respectfully, we've had 4 years of evidence, John. Woody just isn't the guy. There's another layer to this, and it's that Quinn Buckner and Steve, and he forgot his last name, pushed this hire on Dolson. This fan base is 90% done with Woody. Besides the on-the-court ineptitude, recruiting woes, he also says all the wrong things. Someone please tell me what there is to like about Woodson's performance, because I can't think of a single thing. No one believes he could win a national championship, so why keep doing this charade? He has to go. Again, Agent All-Star, you always have loaded questions, and so I'll do my best to unpack as much of this as I can. But you mentioned the Quinn Buckner stuff. I'll start there. So this situation kind of reminds me a whole lot of how Kenny Payne got hired at Louisville. There were a lot of former alum down at the University of Louisville who had a very big influence on bringing Kenny Payne to coach the U of L basketball program. And they continued to, even when Louisville won 4 games in his first season, they still were like, give Kenny time. Even midway through last year, they ended up winning 8 games, by the way, in their second season, a very light jump, if you even want to consider it that. There were still, of course, those who were friends and maybe former players that played with Kenny Payne. They wanted him to have more of a fair shot, as if he hadn't been given enough time already. So that's very similar to what you were talking about with, kind of the inside alum, that want to see their guy have their shot. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But eventually, when the writing is on the wall, you have to be able to move on and adjust, because that's your job. So if it ends up coming to that, then I would hope that Quinn Buckner and all those others involved will make the right decision. What else do we have here? You say, please tell me what there is to like about Woodson's performance. You can't think of a single thing. I mean, I'll say a couple things. I think Woodson does a really good job with Indiana's big men. And I thought he did a really good job during Trace Jackson Davis's final 2 seasons. And I thought he did a really good job with Khalil Ware last year. I know we didn't watch Khalil Ware before Indiana, but supposedly he took a massive jump from Oregon to Indiana during his 1 season with the Hoosiers. And he had an element to his game that Trace Jackson Davis didn't have, and that was a 3-point shot. Now, Trace Jackson Davis had a motor that is irreplaceable. And so that was what you lacked whenever Khalil Ware took over for Trace Jackson Davis last season. So that's one thing that I think Woodson does well. Another thing I think he does well, or did well this past offseason, and I don't know how much he specifically had to do with this, but to have all of the kind of backlash coming your way at the end of the season, and then to rebound with the roster that you put together through the transfer portal, and even finding a way to land Bryson Tucker after you lost Liam McNeely, I think that was a really good thing, because you know what that did? That created a buzz during the offseason that, even though a lot of people were upset with how the year finished, people were like, okay, you know what? We're going to give Indiana and Mike Woodson one more chance, because there's no reason that this roster does not have the ability to do great things if Mike Woodson is indeed a good coach. So, and again, I understand it doesn't take a lot for people to go ahead and turn their head after a couple of bad results and say, okay, I've seen enough. This is too similar to last year. Let's go ahead and cut ties right now. I just don't think Indiana's going to do that. And I mean, if things got really bad, and I'm just talking like they just look like they're not trying, they start losing every game, that may be a situation where you see Woodson get fired mid-season. I don't think that's going to happen. I would never predict something like that to happen. That was Kenny Payne's style of team with Louisville. Mike Woodson is nowhere near as bad as Kenny Payne. And I know that Indiana team last year struggled against Louisville, but I mean, Mike Woodson's not had nearly as bad a seasons as Kenny Payne. He's had one, but he's only coached 3.5 seasons, and one of those was bad. The other two had their ups and downs, but ultimately, I think most people were happy with how the season played out, minus the tournament finish. And I think that might be another aspect on why people are so frustrated. You mentioned we know Woody can't win a national championship. I hate to say who can and can't win a national championship, especially when you've only been a head coach at this level for a short amount of time. But I think the perception is, like, with Mike Woodson being as old as he is and not having as many accolades. I know he did well in the NBA for a decent amount of time, but that's not the exact same thing as the college level. And so I think there's a lot of assumptions that are just like, okay, Woody is never going to be able to do it. And you know what? I'll go ahead and say this. You all are probably right. I currently do not expect Indiana to win a national championship with this team, with Mike Woodson. And maybe that's the answer to every question that we have here, because Indiana should always be expected to be competing for Big Ten championships, Final Fours, national championships, all that sort of thing. And maybe that should be enough to just say, you know what? This is why we need to pull the trigger, because we know he can't do these things. But you also, like, let's just think about this for a second. We can't just say, okay, even though none of us have ever been a head coach, we just know that he can't win a national championship, right? So, I don't know. I think I've kind of worn that answer out. I found myself getting to another kind of a wall with that particular comment. But Agent All-Star, appreciate your comment, and took us down some interesting paths right there. Let's see. Justin Beard, welcome back. He says, Indiana basketball has been pretty dead since Crean got fired. Such a shame. I would love to see Indiana football win Friday night. Would be tremendous. Of course. Yeah, Indiana basketball being dead since Crean. I mean, that's true. That's why you see so many people on social media right now saying things like, people ran Crean out of town, but we would love to have him as our head coach right now. But I also don't think that's true in the same way. Like, we would love 2012, 2013 Crean, even 2016 Crean. We want those Crean teams. And we love Crean as a personality, because Crean bothered so many other fan bases for whatever reason, just because of his goofiness. And he was very easy to make fun of when things were not going well. But when Indiana was doing well, you kind of felt like you had somebody on your sideline that people were just like, no, how is he doing well? How did Tom Crean, how's he doing what he's doing in Indiana or whatever? I don't know. And of course, there are all the jokes about the other things, the different silliness that went on. And then we'll not even going to get into some of the other things that people disliked, whether it be about high school, in-state high school recruiting, that type of stuff. But I think people loved the good days of Tom Crean were really fun. And that's why people are saying what they're saying right now. And rightfully so, because those are my favorite days as an Indiana basketball fan. I've not had too many awesome ones, at least, seasons, I should say. There's been some good ones. There's been some mediocre ones, but there's been 3 that I can recall really, really good seasons, being and those the ones I mentioned earlier. And you could even throw in the year that Kelvin Sampson got fired. I was not really a fan at that point. I was just kind of watching, but I remember that team being really good. But other than that season, there's only been 3 really, really good Indiana basketball teams in my lifetime. And it's kind of crazy saying that out loud, because that is, I mean, I'm 27 now, and to only be able to say that and I say in my lifetime, the 2002 Final Four team, yeah, that counts. But I was not alive, or excuse me, I was alive. I was not at all aware of what was going on. I was 5 years old, couldn't have cared less about basketball. And yeah, that's just a totally different era for Indiana basketball, of course. All right. And I think this brings us to the wacky comment this is from Beowulf 3303. And again, I can't tell if this is, again, I'll just read it. He says, this is how he says it. He says, "How can anyone have optimism about this horribly coached team? Year 4, and it is freaking getting worse, not better. If Crean would have had $6 million to buy players, he would have won a national championship. Archie definitely would have been better." That's the kicker right there. Saying Archie definitely would have been better. This is why I don't know whether or not Beowulf 3303 is indeed being serious with his comment. Archie Miller better than, are you out of your mind? Archie Miller was here for 4 years. And I know some people said his team that, I guess it wasn't his final team, his team in 2020, where the tournament got canceled, would have gotten in. That was still a fringe tournament team. Mike Woodson's had 2 teams better than that. So that's why I don't know. Beowulf, again, I don't want to harp on you too much, but if you're gonna comment like that, and maybe it's all tongue in cheek, and if so, bravo to you, because you got a good laugh out of me. But Archie Miller, man. By the way, I do know I gave Archie Miller a shout out the other day, because I know he was having a decent season, or I should say pretty good start to his 3rd season at Rhode Island. And maybe this is what drove you to make this comment, Mr. Beowulf. But I do want to do another check-in on our man Archie Miller over at the Rhode Island Rams program, and see if they're continuing to do well, or if things have begun to, go back to the way that they're supposed to when you're an Archie Miller coach team. And I believe it looks like they're 10-1 currently still. So they've bounced back after their initial loss to Brown on the road, 84-80, and they followed that up with the win against Central Connecticut, 77-69. And they do look like they have their schedule kind of ramps up finally. It looks like they're going to dive into A10 play against Temple, Duquesne, George Mason. I believe those are all in the A10. So we'll see if this Rhode Island team's for real. I don't really know what Archie Miller has done in year 3 to kind of look formidable, because his first 2 seasons were horrendous at Rhode Island, coming off of what you took your break between Indiana and Rhode Island. But, Archie hadn't had a good season since his final year at Dayton. So, again, maybe that's what drove that comment. So if that's the case, then, maybe you're onto something if Archie definitely would have been better. But Archie Miller he's just not a likable guy. Kind of like Scott Frost, very punchable face. Also love the meme where he walks up to the stand and pulls down the microphone. It just makes you think he's like an angry little elf, So anyway, we'll dive into a couple of more comments, or at least I got one more comment, and it's a football-related comment. We'll get to that on the other side, as well as a few other things. But for now, please welcome former Indiana Hoosier football player Derrick Jackson here to talk all things Indiana and the college football playoff. Joining us once again, it is former Indiana football Hoosier Derrick Jackson here to talk about Indiana football's upcoming first ever college football playoff matchup this Friday night at 8 p.m. in South Bend against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. If you would have told any Indiana fan, former player, anyone, doesn't even have to be somebody affiliated with the program, that this is where the Hoosiers would be at this point this season several months ago, there's not a soul who would have believed you, DJ.
No. You know what, man? Hey, I've always told you, a couple of years back, we are, on the doorstep of dominance, and now we're here. Okay, so we're getting ready to break through this whole thing. And you're right, nobody would have ever believed us. You know what I'm saying? But if they did, just like the head coach that we have now, the great coach Kirk Cignetti, Google him. All right, then you're gonna find out, exactly what those are all about, man. And I tell you what, man, it's exciting, very exciting. These 2 days, I can't even sleep, man. I'm excited.
I know it's going to be very surreal whenever I turn on the television Friday night and just kind of take in the initial moments before the game really gets going. But it's going to be, balls to the wall, as they say, once things kick off at 8 p.m. But one thing I do want to ask you about before we kind of dive into this weekend, last time we had you on, was obviously right before the bucket game. Indiana completely demolishes Purdue 66-0. What was that like for you to see, and just Indiana completely demolish the Boilermaker rivals and get the Old Oaken bucket back?
Man, I wish they put another 14 points on them, man. This is an in-state heated rivalry that has been going on for years, and so it was expected, and I think it was more of a statement. And I like, Coach Kurt Cignetti. His style is a little bit cowboyish. I like that. I mean, he's outside of the box. He sticks up for his team, and he tells you, what he likes and what he doesn't like. And he told it to the playoff football committee. Well, you know what he didn't agree with, man. He told him, and he's going to show him here this Friday. Look, man, you guys can deny us all you want. You guys can put us in the back all you want. You can put us at this seed or that seed, but I'm telling you, we're coming to do something big here.
Now, looking ahead to Friday, of course, you have two programs that traditionally are very different, of course. Notre Dame being the more historical program in the state. They have high expectations. They expect to be in the playoff every single year. There's going to be a certain amount of pressure on the Fighting Irish to do well against Indiana. Where on the other hand, I'm not going to say Indiana's just happy to be here, because that's not the case at all. They want to come in and upset the Fighting Irish, but there's not nearly the amount of pressure and expectation to, be the dominant team. It's more so like, hey, we know you're good. This is our first time here. Let's see what you're made of. What do you feel about, or how do you feel about those two kind of storylines for both teams, and how maybe you think things could play out on Friday?
Well, two things. Number one, Notre Dame ain't beating anybody passing. Okay, they're not doing that. Okay, they're just not doing that. Number two, Indiana is the number 6 scoring offense in the FBS, brother. Okay, all right, and we're number 1 when it comes to running that football. This is going to be a defensive battle. Okay, difference is we can attack from all 3 phases of the game. Notre Dame is not the quarterback. I mean, he's okay at best. Okay, we got Curtis Rourke back there, who was top of the charts, man, in a lot of different things, man, this year when it comes to his stats. 85.7% quarterback rating, brother. All right?
Yeah.
And you can talk about the schedule. Anybody say anything about the schedule all they want. But Notre Dame didn't have the greatest schedule either. Okay. And in Northern Illinois, at the beginning of the season, they gave them a go, and they lost to Northern Illinois.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the schedule, because Indiana's schedule got brought up a whole lot throughout the season, and rightfully so. It wasn't necessarily the toughest thing they could have played, but Notre Dame was right there with them. Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference. They don't have the opportunity to play in a conference championship. I mean, their best 2 to 3 wins are the service academies, Army and Navy, and then Texas A&M to open up the season. So I'd go on record saying that both Indiana and Notre Dame they both have very favorable schedules that they took advantage of. And this is going to be kind of a good first test for both of these teams in the playoff to see who's ready to take that next step and, move up to play the SEC champion in Georgia the week after that.
Right. I mean, Coach Marcus Freeman has done a great job. My hat's off to him. A great job there. You understand what I'm saying? So this is going to be a defensive ball game here. All right. This is going to be about the will to win. Defense wins championship. Okay. I'm telling you that right now. Difference is, like I said before, we can break that game open. And now, watch the tape now. See, I mean, DJ don't play anymore, but I still watch the tape. And I'm going to tell you something. Notre Dame will give up some big plays, brother. They will give up big plays. I'm telling you that right now. So in Curtis Rourke and company can make some big plays. So, it's going to be, like I said, a defensive ball game. And, we put up a lot of points, this season. And I'm confident that we can do the same thing against Notre Dame.
You mentioned it being potentially a defensive ball game. And that very well may be the case, especially when you look at the weather forecast for Friday. I believe in South Bend, it's supposed to be around 27, 28 degrees. And earlier in the day, there's a decent chance for snow. And we've seen Indiana play in a couple of cold weather games so far already this year. I mean, they put up 66 points on Purdue. So I doubt the weather necessarily has that big of a factor in things being a defensive game. I mean, it very well could, though. But when you look at both of the offenses, you already mentioned Indiana and Curtis Rourke, but Notre Dame, on the other hand, if you look at their last 5 games, and I know the opponents, just like Indiana, aren't the best, but 4 out of their last 5 games, they're averaging 50 points a game on offense. And that's something that I don't want to say Indiana should be scared about, but it wouldn't surprise me if this does end up being more of an offensive showdown, especially one thing I think might happen, DJ, those first couple of drives for both teams may be very indicative of what or how the game ends up playing out, because if the teams come out tight and then, they're kind of nervous, they're playing in a college football playoff game, it's the first one of the postseason, I could see things maybe being a little tough for both Indiana and Notre Dame's offenses. But maybe Indiana throws a punch first, or Notre Dame does, and then the other team punches right back. Then you may get yourself into the other style of game. So it could very well be a coin flip on what we're going to get from both of these teams on Friday night.
Right. I mean, again, you don't know what you're going to get, so you're going to have to kind of feel that thing out. But remember, just like I said, their defense stats that's why I said it's going to be a defensive ball game, because don't let their defense stats fool you. These guys were good defensively. All right.
Yeah.
They were very good. And the difference is, though, like I said before, we can put some points up. And if we can make them throw the football, they're in trouble. But if we get in a running battle, like you said, with them, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a run battle. But again, we have an outlet. Curtis Rourke and company, he can throw that football. I mean, we've got Surratt out there. We've got 2 or 3 great receivers. I believe Omarion Cooper. We're looking at, like you said, let's test this thing out. Let's see what it's like from the very beginning, and then they're going to go from there. But we're going to make them. They're going to have to throw the football. Our defense is just too good, brother.
Another thing, and this is not necessarily related to on the field stuff, but one thing that's been the storyline the past couple of weeks is how expensive tickets have been to get into Notre Dame Stadium this Friday. I believe they've gone down just a little bit. I saw prices as high as over $1,000 initially. I've seen that number go down to closer to $500 or $600, depending on who you're looking at buying from. But for somebody like me, that's an impossible thing to, invest. I mean, I get what you're paying for. You're paying for kind of this once in a lifetime experience potentially for Indiana football. But it just disappoints me that it's so difficult to have to buy tickets that are that expensive for a first round playoff game. Maybe I'm just a poor person, DJ.
Well, hey, you and I both, man. Let me tell you something though. But Indiana has brought excitement to the entire footprint of college football. All right. So people are, like you said before, they're still in that this is a Cinderella type thing. So you know what? Once in a lifetime thing. Let's see it. Let's turn this stadium red. I mean, that's a storied franchise up there in South Bend. So they're going to turn this thing red, man. And the tickets are only going to get higher. And you know what? Rightfully so. I mean, you're going to listen, what they're paying for, they're paying to see how far Indiana's going to go. I'm not saying that they're not coming to see Notre Dame. Notre Dame is expected to be here. Notre Dame has won national championship. But if I spend my $500, I'm spending that because, listen, man, I want to see Indiana, this team that I kept hearing about all season, this team that won 11 football games this year. That's what I'm coming to see. Coach Curt Cignetti has demanded that from the student body, from the community, from the fans, and he's getting results, brother. He is getting results. Trust me.
Now, realistically, DJ, and honestly, this may be kind of difficult to, put a realistic answer on this because really we don't know yet. But how far do you think that this Indiana team has the ability to go? Is it just around? Do you think they can actually go win the entire thing? What do you think this Indiana team's ceiling is for the postseason?
3 words: all the way. All right.
I would expect nothing less from you, DJ. I expect nothing less from you.
Exactly, man. Let me tell you something. I never give up my. I'm not. Forget about Georgia. Georgia can be beat. We've seen that. Okay, we're not there yet, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Oh, Notre Dame can be beat. So Indiana can be beat. Every team out there can be beat. But my expectation here, brother, is that we go all the way. All right, we go all the way to the door, and when we go through it, I'm gonna hit you back, and I'm gonna say, remember I said doorstep of dominance. Now we're at dominance, brother. So I got that confidence. Yes, I do.
I tell you what, I love it, DJ. And I know I've told you this before, whether it be on the air or off the air, but if you were ever to have your own show, I don't know anybody who has ever used the phrase on the doorstep of dominance, especially in the way that you have. That, in my opinion, is the perfect name for any sort of show that you could come up with, especially sports related. But, and again, that's besides the point. I love that phrase, and I love how quickly things have come together. You said it last year whenever Indiana football looked like they were definitely in a bad place at the end of the Tom Allen era. Things went well for a little while, but the train fell off the tracks rather abruptly. But you still continued on with the narrative that Indiana football has the ability to be on the doorstep of dominance, so to speak, and again, it's almost like you're a prophet, Mr. DJ. I'm just saying that tongue in cheek, but it's almost like you knew that this thing was really on its way, the way that it's happened this season.
We just had to get the right pieces in place. This whole NIL thing, when people were doubting it, I do understand this whole transfer portal thing. People were doubting it, but listen, Coach Curt Cignetti, he's going to go and get the players he needs to put in the right place to continue us on. All right, we've got. I'm gonna tell you something. It's Sean Ashbury, man. Oh my God, I keep talking about this defense. I keep saying defense. Doorstep of dominance with this defense. Sean Ashbury back there. I mean, the edge that we got, man. I mean, Aiden Fisher, we got a lot of things going on. And I'm gonna tell you something. Right now, with those players, what we have right now, we can go all the way and we can take this thing to the house. I just got that confidence in Coach Curt Cignetti, and he's going to continue to build. This is not a one-season thing, folks. He's going to continue to build.
And that's the thing, too. I even looked ahead at the schedule a couple of days ago. And when you look at next year, if you're looking at previous Indiana teams or previous iterations of the program, you're obviously always hunting for 6 or 7 wins. Whereas I'm looking at next year's schedule, and if Curt Cignetti pieces together the type of roster that he created this year, I think there's no reason that at bare minimum, Indiana should be expected to get 9 wins out of the 2025 schedule. And again, that's just, I don't want to say that's the floor because things can go wrong all the time, but the base level of success in Cignetti's second season, I think, is 9-3, and they could even elevate to what they're doing right now if things come together the way that they have this year. It's just crazy that we are in this new world of where Indiana football can be expected to win that many games and be competing at the highest level of college football right now.
Right. I mean, we're at the expectation of ourselves. We're not at the expectation of everyone else because everyone else didn't expect us to be here. But now we've got some believers. And like you said, I am in the works of formulating, putting together my own show and everything. So I will be touching bases with you on that. But yes, I'm telling you right now, man. Hey, you know what? I'm expecting Coach Curt Cignetti to have another 10-win season. Looking ahead at that schedule, another 10-win season next year. I'm really looking forward to that. I think he has what? I mean, he has gotten every bonus he could ever get this year. I think his bonuses pretty much. I mean, Coach of the Year. You know what I'm saying?
Every news outlet, I think there's 4 or 5 different ones, has given National Coach of the Year honors to one Kurt Cignetti, of course.
Right. So let me tell you something, boy. I feel confident that we're going to go into next season ranked in the top 10. And like I said, I think we can go all the way. So I'm just very excited about this game coming up here against those Fighting Irish on Friday night. And I'm confident that you and I, we will be having another conversation next week. And that's going to be a very exciting one when Indiana goes to the next level, brother.
I hope you're right, DJ. And I'm glad you mentioned next week, because my plan, I would love to, as long as Indiana continues on this ride through the college football playoff, I'd love to do some weekly check-ins with you throughout this postseason just to see what ends up happening. And then, of course, we'll reconvene in the offseason on occasion as well. But good stuff. Any final thoughts before we, next time we'll talk, we'll know whether or not this Indiana team beat Notre Dame. So what's kind of your closing thoughts on everything?
Hey, listen, folks, get out there, support the Hoosiers, enjoy this football game that we're about to play, and we're about to beat the Fighting Irish. Go Hoosiers.
Heck yeah, and Merry Christmas to you and your family, Mr. DJ.
You too, John. That's next week. Yeah, next week is Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you and your family, John. And thank you so much, man. Go Hoosiers.
Yeah, and if we do this again, we'll aim for next Friday, since Christmas is next Wednesday.
Okay. All right. No problem, John. Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
Good stuff from DJ. Really love his energy and enthusiasm. Very infectious when it comes to the Indiana football program, especially when things weren't going well. He was always a good source of positivity, and it's nice to see that for somebody like him, who is a part of one of the the best regime of Indiana football history prior to where we are now with Bill Mallory, to see somebody who came under that head coach and gets to see Indiana go to new heights. I'm sure he is thrilled beyond belief, and I'm sure he will enjoy Indiana's game against Friday night against the Irish. I did not leave us a whole lot of time. I cannot believe that I monologued for 40 minutes before going to Derrick Jackson. And I don't know, do I apologize for that? I feel like we got a lot of good out of it. But either way, I do want to go over that one comment I mentioned that I hadn't gotten to yet, and then I'll do a quick non-rev shout out, and then we'll get out of here. And I'm just going to save a lot of the things that I had for today. I'll try to get to most of them on Friday, because I believe pretty much everything I have on here that we didn't get to will be a good talking point for Friday. So looking forward to that. Also, like I said, Jeffrey the Greek and Mitchell Page will have them. So we'll have a loaded show on Friday to get us rolling for the I was going to say the eve of, but it's the day of the college football playoff. And here's another thing with that. I'll probably do that entire show Thursday afternoon and evening, and hopefully have it released early Friday morning. That way you guys can consume it as early as, before the game happens, of course. Because, once the game happens, then it's over. All the fun and speculation of what could be to come, it's over. So I'll try to get Friday's show put out as early as I can. And I don't think that'll be an issue. But the final comment I hadn't got to yet from Mike Shenefield says, am I going to say IU will beat Notre Dame? No. But I'm feeling pretty good about this game. Indiana beat Michigan, yes, at home. But Michigan beat Ohio State there. I don't know if Notre Dame could beat Ohio State. Very good comparison, but one thing you got to always remember, for some reason, with certain rivalries, teams just play different when they play their rival. Ohio State and Michigan is one of those examples. And Michigan has had Ohio State's number for now, 4 or 5 seasons? And so Ohio State, I don't know if I've said this comment, but I've heard this comment made about that game. Ohio State played that game with clenched ass cheeks. They played Indiana loose, because that was supposed to be Indiana's moment to shine against Ohio State. They're like, oh, we're big bad Indiana, Google me. And so Ohio State, took advantage, and they're like, we're going to laugh at Indiana's face. They're not nearly on our level. That's why you saw Will Howard getting all animated on the sidelines after they gave Indiana a nice little spanking. And that's what they did. Even though Indiana did shoot themselves in the foot a few different times during that game, Ohio State took advantage and spanked Indiana that day. Now, I would love to potentially see a rematch if that happens during the playoffs. It wouldn't happen until the national championship. And what would be awesome about that is it would get you'd play that game in perfect conditions. I believe. I think the national championship, yeah, it's played in a dome. It's in Atlanta. So if Indiana does make it to that point, you won't have the excuse of, dropping a punt near the end zone because it's raining. You wouldn't expect, you don't like when those things happen anyway, but there wouldn't be an excuse for it anymore. You just wouldn't expect it to happen regardless. So Mike, you're not saying Indiana's going to beat Notre Dame, but you never know, right? I guess it's kind of what you're getting at. I'm more confident than I was, and I'm sure by the time we get to Friday, I'll be confident all throughout the day, and then we'll get a few minutes to kick off. And as a fan, go back to what I just said about Ohio State. Well, I'll have some clenched ass cheeks. I'll be nervous, but I'll be excited. I cannot believe we are nearly 48 by the evening tonight. We will be 48 hours away from Indiana playing in their first ever playoff game in history. Now you could say, I know I'm being dramatic with that. Go back to 67, that Rose Bowl game. You could call that a playoff game back then, of course. You can call that the national championship game, right? So yeah, different circumstances, of course, with the way things are put together nowadays. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad, and especially now that we kind of know where basketball stands currently. I'm glad that we still have football to be excited about, and let's go, baby. I'm looking forward to Friday, and again, more loaded show coming your way. One more thing, though, I mentioned I don't want to leave them out. I want to shout out Indiana women's basketball continuing their winning streak. They defeat Bellarmine. They did this over the weekend, 95-61, and they will continue their non-conference slate this Sunday against Oakland. You can watch it on Big Ten Plus. And then they will move back into Big Ten play permanently, similar to Indiana, but beginning on December 28th. They will stay at home for 2 games in a row in conference, Wisconsin on the 28th, and then January 4th against UCLA. Both of those games will be televised on non-plus platforms, meaning you can watch the Wisconsin game on BTN, and you could watch the UCLA game on Fox. So shout out to Terry Morin and Indiana women's basketball for getting back to their winning ways after a bit of a struggle to begin the season back in November. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Looking forward to Friday and hope you all enjoyed yourselves today at whatever time you took this in. And again, leave a comment. Love all the comments. And I don't mean to, I don't want to dwell on this, but if you thought I was picking on you, for certain comments that were made, I don't mean to come off that way. I'm just having fun. And hope you had some fun as well. So until Friday, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.